thank you for having me once again. So I'm from the Maskeei, Energy Efficiency and Conservation Society. We are focusing and dealing our activity on advocating the use of energy. So from the demand side of the energy, so far the Indonesian government already have made so much efforts on supply side of the energy, but rather less attention is being paid to the demand. And I'm happy today that I heard all the speakers speaks about energy efficiency and energy use, and that is a very encouraging to me. And to give you the information, in any NDC, nationally determined contribution that I read, energy efficiency is always on top. So in my presentation, which is my insight on behalf of the society, I'm talking about clean energy rather than new and renewable energy like the government nomenclature is being used. So I would say that we are going in transition towards using clean energy in the future. Okay, let me start with what I think the Indonesian ambition. Please? Oh, sorry. Yes. Indonesia has a great ambition in economic development to becoming the world top 5 economies by mid of the century in terms of the GDP, because if you are going to rate or to range the country's economy, then you have to see the assumption, etc. But in terms of GDP, Indonesia is becoming the 5th or the 6th biggest economy in the world, hopefully by 2050. To achieve the ambitious goals, Indonesia must produce higher economic growth than what it has ever made in average during the last decade. Assuming there was no major disruption, challenges like the recent pandemic and other global threats like war or serious conflict taking place in the heart of developed country like what we are seeing now. The economic development must follow the path of sustainable development, where the carbon imperative must be met in order to be in line with the global efforts in achieving the common goals. To fuel the ambitious development, Indonesia needs to increase the amount of energy following the conventional wisdom, which is the 1.5 to 2% above GDP growth. And this energy need should be met by clean energy resulting from the energy transition efforts. As I said just now, we consider clean energy is a combination or a sum of the renewable energy and energy efficiency. If you combine renewable energy and energy efficiency together, then you will have the bigger impact on clean energy development. So what is the opportunity that Indonesia can achieve their goal? Indonesia has abundance of any sort of renewable energy, you name it. We have every renewable energy that you can mention. There's a great opportunity to becoming a strong player in the energy storage market because of the development of the electric vehicles. We have reserve in our natural reserve we have important raw material for energy, for battery. Indonesia is among the first countries in the world adopting low carbon development model. Excuse me. Yeah, that's much better. So Indonesia is among the first countries in the world that adopt low carbon development, or LCD, model in its economic development. Indonesia is also demographically has what we call the demographic bonus. So we have abundance of productive manpower by the mid of the century. The current government has made great efforts in improving policies and regulatory, the current government has made great efforts in improving policies and regulatory framework to accelerate the economic growth. Then during the last 8 years or so, the country has made an unprecedented strides in building the modern infrastructure to enable the country to produce higher economic growth. If we have the opportunity, what are the challenges? Because we have a lot of challenges that we have to overcome. Despite its known abundance, as I said, of renewable energy resources, the country is still very much dependent on the dirty fossil or non-renewable energy resources, as the previous speakers have already been demonstrating. Political will and commitment to develop clean energy are there. That's clear. But for a complex reason, the country is still facing various challenges when it comes to translating commitment into effective action for reducing the dependence on non-renewables. The renewable energy development has recently been gaining momentum to make it grow faster. This is due to the greater volatility of the global market for conventional energy and the increasing global pressure associated with the need for energy transition towards achieving net zero emission by mid of the century. However, the country is still struggling with building effective regulatory framework supporting the long-term development of clean energy. The benefit of energy efficiency, which is the low-hanging fruits that should be harvested before using any other energy, are still in many cases not well understood by the stakeholders. Therefore, no real massive efforts in energy efficiency has been made until recently, which is supposedly to be made in tandem with the development of renewable energy to have a bigger impact on clean energy, as I said earlier. In many cases, the energy efficiency efforts are still facing classical challenges, which is in finding the suitable financing models and lacking real support from the government policy and effective regulatory mechanism. The government is making efforts to do that, but it's still too slow in our view. So looking at the opportunity, Indonesia has to capitalize on it. To help achieve the objective of the energy transition, it would take for Indonesia to continuously and well-manage clean energy development and deployment by all economic stakeholders in the main sectors like industry, commercial, transportation, and household or consumers. That will improve the economic competitiveness in the global market and resiliency in the national energy system under the LCD framework. The government to capitalize on the growing awareness and commitment by the private sectors to deploying more clean energy resources for sustainability by improving policy and regulatory framework that support the development of both the supply and the demand side of the energy equation. Stronger efforts shall be made by the government to encourage the local financial sector to building green, low-carbon energy projects portfolio, while tapping on the funding availability from global sources, mandated by Paris Agreement in 2015, and the existing sources from bilateral collaboration, donors, etc. But I make the note here that unfortunately the prospect of that utilizing the global sources of finance, unfortunately, is being disrupted by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And last but not least is the ongoing war in Ukraine. It cost the developed world so much money to defend the democracy. Stronger commitment by the current government and acting on the in the research and development activities in the energy sector will benefit the economy in the future towards achieving the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. So what the government should do is more to have to manage the energy demand, because, as I said just now, generally the cheapest way to meet the increasing energy demand for development is not necessarily to increase supply immediately, but rather to seeing how we should find a way to reduce the energy demand. So instead of immediately adding supply, we have to think about how can we save the energy and use it more wisely. Understanding accurately the energy demand system is the fundamental thing to do before taking efforts towards increasing the supply. And this, as I said just now, that this has been done by the government for so many years. So until only about maybe 10 years ago, the government starting to pay attention on how to manage the energy demand. Ideally, renewable energy and energy efficiency have to be developed in tandem. It means in parallel or together to ensure the energy equation is in balance and the aggregate efforts will produce greater benefits from the clean energy development towards achieving the low carbon development goals. And during the last decades, Indonesia has gradually made some progresses in improving the energy demand management by addressing energy efficiency efforts, particularly in the commercial buildings and in some area of the industrial sectors. However, the scale of the efforts is not massive enough, in our view, to produce significant impact on reducing the total energy demand on the national economy. An updated and more comprehensive version of the core regulation, which will replace the one issued in 2009, the so-called PP number 70, that's the core regulation for energy efficiency and conservation, is finally underway, but in our view, it is rather slow in developing that. Expectedly, it will appear before end of 2022. In the transportation sector, the demand for energy continues to rise, but we'll see it declining when Indonesia began effectively transforming the conventional cars or vehicle-based automotive industry into EV, along with, in our view, along with rebuilding the rail transportation system across the country.
Pak John, can you
yes,
just
I'm
summarizing here?
Yes.
Okay.
What Indonesia has to go forward in energy transition toward energy, I'm not going to read this at all, but I would summarize that. Number one, the government should eliminate energy subsidy gradually for fossil fuels and electricity, and reallocate funds to support the clean energy development. The reallocation of the fund from subsidy has been done by President Jokowi in this government at the beginning of their administration in 2015. So they have to, the government should continue doing that. Indonesia also have to continue improving the current and create new policies and regulations that give effective and consistent support to developing energy, clean energy. The third is create effective funding mechanism, effective incentive and disincentive measure for clean energy projects and efforts by the stakeholders. And last but not least is to conduct capacity building programs to improve the human capital. That is what we hope that the government is going to do as the way forward towards the energy transition to achieve the net zero energy emission by 2050 or 2060 or lower. With that, I would end my presentation because the time is so limited. Thank you very much.